Is there any greater heartache than growing old, dreaming of the future, and watching every hope of a legacy crumble into the dust of time? Abraham, at 75, knew this anguish all too well. In *Ur of the Chaldeans*, as the thick scent of incense and sweat rose from pagan rituals, he felt like an outsider, an empty echo amidst the fervent worship of his brothers and his father, Terah, bowing before clay idols. The wealth of his flocks, the vastness of his servants, everything seemed insignificant compared to the emptiness in his own home, the absence of a child. Sarah, his beloved wife, carried the burden of barrenness, an invisible wound that burned them both. In that culture, the lack of offspring wasn't just a disappointment, it was a whispered curse, a sign of divine disfavor. He saw the pitying glances, the veiled questions about heirs, and felt Terah's silent pressure to accept his fate and, perhaps, take another wife. But his heart, stubborn and true, refused to abandon Sarah, even as the promise of an heir seemed, with each passing year, an ever more distant mirage. How many nights had Abraham spent under the same starry sky, not the stars that guided the priests in their meaningless rituals, but those that shone with an eloquent silence? He questioned the purpose of his life, the meaning of his vast fortune, the reason for his own existence, if there would be no one to carry on his name. His family's clay gods were deaf, mute. The vast sky, in turn, seemed a mirror of his own inner void. The monotonous drone of the chants and the pungent odor of the fires mingled with the whistling wind that cut across his face. Abraham sighed, a sound almost inaudible in the immensity of that night. Before we dive deeper into this story, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. It's awesome to know these stories can touch hearts in so many different places. Leave your comment below and let me know. That night, Abraham's anguish reached an unbearable peak. He moved away from the hustle of the ziggurat, seeking the solitude of the desert, where the silence was so dense it seemed to swallow every sound. The cold Mesopotamian night air was a temporary balm for his restless soul. Now get ready to dive into the incredible journey of someone who, with courage and vulnerability, overcame unimaginable challenges amidst pain and uncertainty. You'll learn how Mindful Challenge H. Cain, Jerain, Manas, Compensatory Asterisk, and Jerain Recognizing Your Limits Ast can be applied in your own life to face moments of crisis and triumph. Let's get started. Hash, 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 a voice in the wilderness. It was then, in the deep, oppressive darkness of the desert, that the voice asterisk, asterisk, erupted. There were no thunderclaps, no supernatural lights, just an overwhelming presence that made every hair on his body stand on end. It had no form, no body, but it filled the space, resonating directly in his mind, not his ears. A sacred terror enveloped him, a primal fear that made him fall to his knees in the cold sand, unable to move. "Abraham," the voice echoed, with the force of 1,000 rivers and the whisper of a night breeze. His name, spoken that way, sounded new, as if it had been redefined, laden with a meaning he didn't comprehend. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry, his tongue heavy and stuck. "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household," the voice continued, and each word was an irrefutable command, "and go to the land I will show you." Abraham blinked, confused, stunned. Leave? Abandon everything he knew? His wealth, his family, his security? To where? The voice didn't reveal. And then, the promise, which, in his disbelief, sounded more like a taunt than a blessing. "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." A great nation? Him, a childless man with a barren wife, would make a great nation? Human logic screamed in his mind that this was absolutely nuts. Was it a delusion, a mirage in the desert, a fruit of his anguish and despair? The voice, however, didn't care for logic. "I am God Almighty," It resonated in his mind, and Abraham felt every fiber of his being acknowledge that sovereignty, even as his reason rebelled. The sun began to rise on the horizon, painting the desert with fiery hues, and Abraham was still there, prostrate, his body trembling not from cold, but from a reverent, confused awe. The order was clear, the promise absurd. His life, until then so well defined, crumbled under the weight of a calling that defied everything he knew. The unbelievable decision. Sarah found him hours later, still at the edge of their tent, his gaze lost on the horizon. She knew that look in his eyes, the same one that appeared when he spent sleepless nights gazing at the stars, searching for answers that the clay gods didn't offer. But this time was different. There was a new intensity, a spark of something she couldn't name, madness or conviction. "Abraham, my lord, what happened?" she asked, her voice soft, concerned. He hesitated. How could he explain to a practical woman, accustomed to the security of Ur, that an invisible God had called him to abandon everything for an unknown land and a promise of a child that never came? The fear of being ridiculed, of being seen as a senile old man, was almost as great as the fear of that powerful voice. He knew that his nephew, Lot, always so attached to his logic, would never understand. Yet there was something about that presence, that calling, that prevented him from ignoring it, an urgency that burned in his chest, stronger than doubt. He didn't know where that strength came from, but he knew that, somehow, it was real. He told Sarah, the words coming out in a hesitant whisper. To his surprise, she didn't laugh. Her eyes welled up, and a heavy silence filled the tent. The pain of barrenness was so deep in Sarah that, perhaps, any thread of hope, no matter how improbable, was a relief. "And what will we do?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible. Abraham looked at the beaten earth floor, his thoughts swirling. The answer came without him knowing from where, a sudden conviction that caught him by surprise. "We will leave. We will take our servants and flocks. We will go where he leads us." The decision was made, though uncertainty hung like a thick fog. The news spread like wildfire among the servants, murmurs of disbelief. Abandon a life of comfort for an uncertain journey. Some called him crazy, others foolish. Lot, his nephew, who was used to the opulence of Ur, argued with him for days, trying to make him see reason. "Uncle, this is madness. Giving up everything for a voice in the desert, and the promise of a child? Sarah is already old, and so are you." Abraham listened, silently, Lot's words echoing his own deepest doubts. Every logical argument from his nephew was a gut punch, reinforcing the internal battle between faith and reason. He felt like a lunatic, walking on the edge of an abyss, but the voice, even if silent for now, remained in his memory, imposing and irresistible. The smell of Ur, with its spices and soot, began to suffocate him, making the promise of a new land, however uncertain, a breath of fresh air. He had to leave. The days that followed were a frenzy. They sold properties, organized the flocks, and prepared the servants for the long, arduous journey. The caravan was immense, laden with everything they could carry, a testament to the prosperity Abraham was leaving behind. Every step away from Ur was an act of blind faith, a rupture with everything known. The desert stretched ahead, vast and menacing, and Abraham felt the weight of the promise, of the legacy, and of the ridicule that awaited him if he failed. If you've ever felt torn between what reason says and what your heart or faith compels you to do, leave a comment and share your experience. I'd love to hear how you dealt with that crossroads. ###. Trials and tribulations. The journey to Canaan was a trial by fire. Each day in the desert brought with it the pain of thirst, the bone-deep weariness, and the relentless heat that seemed to melt away what little hope remained. Abraham, accustomed to the luxury and stability of Ur, felt the weight of his decision with every step. His nephew Lot, ever the pragmatist, pointed out the dangers, the loss of livestock to raiders, and the scarcity of water, reinforcing the doubts that hammered at Abraham's mind. Have I gone mad? Is this voice just an old man's delusion? Hunger tightened its grip during the crossing, provisions dwindled, and despair settled into the caravan. It was then that news of Egypt, a land of abundance and wealth, reached their ears. The promise of a land God would show them seemed distant and unattainable in the face of the desert's cruel reality. Logic, once again, won over faith. Abraham decided to detour to Egypt, seeking refuge from the famine. But Egypt brought with it a new ordeal, one that revealed the fragility of Abraham's faith. Upon arrival, the fear that the Egyptians would kill him to take Sarah, who was remarkably beautiful even in her old age, consumed him. The promise of a son, of a great nation, was forgotten in an instant of pure human terror. "Say you are my sister," he pleaded with Sarah, the words bitter in his mouth, knowing he was exposing his wife to danger to save his own skin. Sarah, out of love and obedience, went along with the charade. And what was meant to be a solution became a disaster. Pharaoh took Sarah into his harem, and Abraham received riches and livestock in return. But guilt and shame gnawed at him. He had failed. He had doubted the protection of the God who called him, putting his wife and, by extension, the divine promise itself at risk. It took a Norse plague asterisk sent by God upon Pharaoh's household for the truth to come out. The revelation that Sarah was married brought Pharaoh's fury, who expelled them from Egypt, humiliated, but alive. That episode was a hard blow to Abraham's soul. He saw with painful clarity his own flaws, his fear, his lack of trust. That invisible God, whom he barely knew, had intervened to protect him, even when he himself had wavered. Guilt was a heavy burden, but, paradoxically, it also sparked a small flame of hope. Even in his weakness, God had not abandoned him. Back in Canaan, the promised land, the prosperity of Abraham and Lot with their vast flocks led to conflict. Their shepherds quarreled over pastures and water wells. Abraham, seeking peace and perhaps trying to redeem himself from his past failures, proposed to Lot that they separate. "Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your shepherds and mine, for we are close relatives," he said, offering Lot the first choice of the land. Lot, with his pragmatic eyes, chose the fertile plain of the Jordan towards Sodom, a prosperous but notoriously wicked city. Abraham, once again, set logic aside and trusted in God's guidance, contenting himself with the land Lot rejected. After Lot's departure, the voice manifested again, this time with a tenderness that comforted Abraham's afflicted heart. "Look around from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever," the voice said. "I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted." The words were a balm, a renewal of the promise Abraham had almost forgotten in his journey of errors and fears. He didn't understand how it would all be fulfilled, but he felt that, despite his failures, the divine promise remained. He built an altar to the Lord there, a monument not only to faith, but also to forgiveness and the renewal of an unwavering covenant, despite human weakness. The weight of waiting. The years dragged on, turning the promise into a distant whisper, almost forgotten. Abraham and Sarah grew old. The pain of barrenness, once an open wound, was now a deep scar. But it still hurt. With each passing lunar cycle without a sign of life in Sarah's womb, human logic screamed louder. 75, 80, 85 years. Where was the child of the promise? Where was the great nation? The tension between Abraham and Sarah reached its peak. She, tormented by the guilt of her own barrenness, saw the despair in her husband's eyes. The culture of their time offered a solution, brutal in its simplicity. Nigh or not, Sarah's Egyptian servant. In an act of desperation and a human attempt to help God, Sarah told Abraham, her voice choked with pain, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abraham, exhausted from waiting and seeking a tangible solution to his anguish, yielded. The decision, motivated by impatience and a lack of faith in God's timing, brought devastating consequences. Hagar became pregnant, and pride filled her heart. She began to despise Sarah, her mistress, and Abraham's tent, once a sanctuary of peace, became a battlefield. The birth of Ishmael was a false victory. Abraham, with his son in his arms, felt a bittersweet mix of relief and guilt. He was a son, yes, but not the son of the promise, not Sarah's heir. Ishmael's smile couldn't erase the sadness in Sarah's eyes, nor the discord that had settled in their home. Trying to solve the problem their own way had only created more pain and suffering. 10 years passed since Abraham had left Ur. He was 99. And Ishmael was already a teenager. God's promise seemed even more distant, almost a faded memory. But then, the voice returned, not in a whisper in the desert, but with the authority of a king in his own home. "I am God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully, and be blameless. Then I will make my covenant between me and you, and will greatly increase your numbers." Abraham bowed down again, his heart heavy. "What about Ishmael?" he dared to ask, his voice choked. "May he now live before you." The divine answer was clear and unshakable. "Yes, your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. With him I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant for his descendants. But also I will bless Ishmael." The promise for Sarah was reinforced, but it came with a sign. Circumcision, a physical mark of the covenant. Sometime later, news of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah reached Abraham, a terrifying testimony to the power and justice of the God he followed. Lot, his nephew, lived in Sodom. Abraham, concerned, approached God in prayer, a conversation that bordered on negotiation. "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" he asked, insisting, bargaining for lives, decreasing the number of righteous needed to save the city. 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. It was the first time Abraham acted not as a fearful servant, but as a reluctant partner in the covenant, interceding for others, demonstrating a growing faith, even if still permeated by fear. Despite Abraham's intercession, the cities were destroyed. He saw the smoke rise like from a furnace, and the image of annihilation was etched into his mind. It was a clear demonstration of the power of that God who had made such impossible promises. Fear mixed with respect. If God was capable of such destruction, he was also capable of fulfilling what he had promised, no matter how absurd it seemed. And indeed, the promise was fulfilled. Sarah, at 90, gave birth to Isaac. Laughter filled the tent. Isaac. The name meant, "he laughs," a testament to the joy and disbelief overcome. Abraham, now Abraham *, father of many nations, as God renamed him, felt immense relief. A decades-long weight finally lifted from his shoulders. Human logic had been silenced, and faith, though often faltering, had finally been rewarded. Isaac was living proof that the impossible was possible for the God he had decided to follow. The one who called him from Ur was faithful. If at any point in your life you felt that the wait for a divine promise was too long, or that human logic made you doubt, know that you're not alone. Abraham's journey is a reminder that faith isn't the absence of doubt, but action despite it. The ultimate test. The joy of Isaac's birth, however, wasn't forever. Abraham's toughest trial was yet to come, one that would make all his previous doubts seem insignificant. One day the voice, now familiar but with a tone that chilled him to the bone, called out, "Abraham." He responded, "Here I am." And then, the words that tore at his heart, each one a dagger. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about." A burnt offering? Isaac? The son of the promise. the laughter of his old age, the miracle that proved God's faithfulness? Abraham's reasons screamed in protest. What kind of God would ask such a thing? Was it a cruel test? An illusion? Or had he finally gone mad? Images of pagan sacrifices, so common in Ur, flooded his mind, but he never imagined the invisible God he followed would ask for something so barbaric. Yet, the voice was not that of a demon or a madman. It was the same voice that had called him from Ur, that had guided him through the desert, that had delivered him from Egypt, that had fulfilled the most impossible promise. His incomprehension was total, but the authority, undeniable. There was no time to question. The order was to obey. The pain was physical, as if his heart was being crushed within his chest. The next morning, before the sun even rose, Abraham got up. He didn't speak to Sarah. How could he explain to her that the son they had waited decades for, the miracle, would now be the sacrifice? He saddled his donkey, took 2 of his servants, and with Isaac cut the wood for the burnt offering. The silence was overwhelming, laden with the weight of the most agonizing decision of his life. Every movement was mechanical, dictated by a force that transcended his own will. The 3-day walk to Mount Moriah was a silent funeral procession. Every step was torture. Isaac, the innocent boy, walked by his side, his gaze curious, his childlike laughter sounding, to Abraham like a funeral lament. The servants, oblivious to the true purpose of the journey, followed behind. Abraham felt like a murderer. His faith, so painstakingly built over the years, seemed to disintegrate with every foot he traversed. On the 3rd day, when they spotted the mountain in the distance, Abraham told the servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there to worship. We will come back to you." The lie came easily, a reflection of his desperation. Isaac carried the wood, Abraham the fire and the knife. "Father!" Isaac called, his voice pure. "The fire and wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Isaac's innocent question cut Abraham deeper than any blade. For an instant, he wavered. Tears blurred his eyes. "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son," he replied, his voice choked. An unintentional prophecy that would reveal divine provision. At that moment, there wasn't a glimmer of hope, only the darkness of blind obedience. His world was crumbling, and the weight of the knife in his hand seemed like that of an entire universe. He was about to destroy the very future God had promised. The Lord will provide. They reached the top of Mount Moriah. Abraham, with hands that trembled but did not hesitate, built the altar with the stones he found. Every rock he stacked was a piece of his heart being crushed. Isaac, the boy with curious eyes, watched his father with innocence, not comprehending the imminent horror. The silence of the mountain was broken only by the sound of the wind, and, perhaps, by the frantic pounding of Abraham's heart. He arranged the wood on the altar. He took a deep breath. The air seemed thick and heavy. It was time, the moment to fulfill the order. With a choked voice, he called Isaac and instructed him to lie on the wood. There was no resistance from his son, only an unwavering trust that broke Abraham's soul into 1,000 pieces. He bound him, not with ropes, but with the pain of a father killing his own dream. Tears streamed down his face, hot and bitter, mixing with the dust. With the knife in hand, he raised his arm, the morning sun reflecting on the cold blade. His eyes met Isaac's one last time, and in that childlike gaze Abraham saw not fear, but pure acceptance, an unconditional love that made the act even more unbearable. It was the image of the perfect sacrifice, and it tore him apart. His hand trembled, but he didn't hesitate. He couldn't. Trust in his God, even amidst the deepest incomprehension, was the only thing holding him up. The instant the knife began to descend, poised to strike his son's body, a powerful voice boomed from the heavens, resounding, no longer in his mind, but audible, filling the air with unquestionable authority. "Abraham! Abraham!" His hand stopped, suspended in the air, the blade inches from Isaac's skin. Abraham's heart pounded, and overwhelming relief flooded his being, mixed with confusion. "Do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him," the voice continued, and its words were like a balm for the open wound in his soul. "Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham dropped the knife, which fell with a dull thud on the stone. He untied Isaac, who looked at him, still not fully understanding what had happened, but now with a spark of hope in his eyes. Abraham looked up, seeking the origin of that voice, and he saw, caught by its horns in a nearby thicket, there was a ram, a lamb, just as he had told Isaac. God himself had provided. The words he had spoken to his son on the way, a desperate lie, now revealed themselves as a fulfilled prophecy. There, at that exact moment of total surrender, of abandoning all human logic and reason, divine provision manifested unequivocally. He took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering instead of his son. The smell of burning meat, once a prelude to horror, was now an aroma of gratitude and redemption. The altar, which would have been the site of the greatest sacrifice of his life, became the testimony of a faith that had been broken and remade, stronger than ever. Abraham called that place, *, the Lord will provide, an eternal reminder that God provides at the last minute, when all human hope vanishes. The voice spoke again, reaffirming all the promises, now with a weight and conviction that dispelled any lingering doubt in his heart. "Because you have done this, and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me." That descent from Mount Moriah was not the same as the ascent. Abraham was not the same man. The pain had been immense, the trial almost unbearable, but the result was an unshakable faith, a deep trust that transcended all logic. He had reached the limits of his human capacity to understand, and, in the abyss of incomprehension, had found the fullness of trust in God. ###, a legacy beyond measure. Years later, the wrinkles on Abraham's face were marks not just of time, but of a lifetime of journeys, of doubts overcome, and of a faith that had withstood every test. He no longer had the anguish of uncertainty, the peace of a man who knew God intimately, not through theories, but through raw and real experiences, hovered over him. The final scene shows him in old age, blessing Shaktatum and Mamo Isaac * and Rebekah, the parents of his future descendants. He was not a distant patriarch, but a grandfather looking toward a future he himself would not fully see, but in which he fully trusted. Isaac and his grandchildren were living proof of the fulfilled promise, their laughter echoing in his tent, a sound that finally banished the bitter memories of the desert. The camera pulls back, revealing his solitary tent under a vast starry sky. It was the same image from the beginning of the journey in Ur, but now the silence of the night was not empty. It was filled with the certainty of divine promises, with the melody of an unbreakable covenant. Abraham, the man who risked everything for an invisible voice, died in peace, remembered not as the fool who sacrificed everything for a hallucination, but as the father of faith, whose legacy stretched for generations. The one who, amidst pain, doubt, and incomprehension, chose to trust. If Abraham's story touched your heart and made you reflect on your own journey of faith, leave your amen in the comments. Your interaction makes all the difference, so we can continue sharing stories that nourish the soul.